Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Hugh Freeze, this Auburn Tigers program kicking off the 2024 season in a little over a week. But we all know one thing for sure. That is not going to stop Hugh Freeze from continuing to get it done on the recruiting trail, most notably getting a lot of momentum for four-star defensive lineman who is currently committed to my Michigan Wolverines. We'll see when and if that happens, but I want to hop on and not only talk about Nate Marshall, but talk about a few other prospects that, as we head into the 2024 season, Auburn is very much in play for on the recruiting trail. We've said this pretty much all summer. There's not a program across the country that seems to have more momentum on the recruiting trail than this Auburn program. Excited to get into it now. Before we do it, as always, a massive shout out to the Auburn fans. It has been an absolute blast covering this program on the recruiting trail over the last couple of weeks and months. And more importantly, the amount of support the Auburn fans have shown the boys. It's been absolutely amazing. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Nate Marshall first. And again, many of you guys know I'm a Michigan fan, so we'll start with Nate Marshall. One, if he does flip to Auburn, wish him absolutely the best. I think more importantly, Auburn is getting a legitimate difference maker in the front seven. You look at Nate Marshall and say, this kid earlier, I think I said this when he committed to Michigan, kind of reminds you of Keldrick Fall coming out of high school. You look at Keldrick Fall coming out of high school was around 6'5", 270 pounds. Nathaniel Marshall coming in at 6'4", 265. Just this really, really big, long frame that is exceptionally athletic for that size. And then you look at the film and say, they kind of win the same way, right? Keldrick Falk won with his length and one with his power at the high school level. It's kind of how Nathaniel Marshall wins as well. They both played tight end at the high school level, were elite pass catchers as well. These two kids are very similar body types, but I think more importantly, very similar caliber athletes. And a lot of the things we said about Keldrick Falk when he committed to Auburn, you kind of have the same conversation with Nate Marshall, where a lot of versatility to Nate Marshall's game. You turn on the film and say, you see him play the edge, you see him play the three tech. Heck, you even see Nathaniel Marshall play a lot of zero. He plays the nose tech position at his high school program. And so he wins and plays all along the defensive line. I think the conversation you want to have with Nate Marshall is, all right, where do we project him to play for this Auburn program over the next couple of years? I think you would start with a very similar role to Keldrick Falk, where you're playing that defensive end position. But what have we said about Keldrick Falk pretty much all offseason? He's up to 288 pounds. Wouldn't be surprised that in some of those pass rushing positions and sets, you're kicking Keldrick Falk to the inside. I think you're going to see a very similar, probably progression physically from Nate Marshall. I would project that he plays his football in the SEC if he ends up committing to Auburn, that is. I would project that Nate Marshall probably plays around 285 pounds as well, because this is a big frame that's already pretty developed, but there's a lot more room for him to add a little bit more mass. So I see very similar, play style and impact from a guy like Keldrick Falk. But at the end of the day, you just want to bet on these kind of traits where this kid is extremely long. He's very athletic, has that versatility along the defensive line. I think the biggest storyline for Auburn, and again, I think people are starting to kind of catch on to what's happening. But I do think that a lot of times when we talk Auburn on the recruiting trail, the attention goes to other positions. You look at the front seven, specifically the defensive line for this Auburn program in that 2025 class. Jared Smith, 5-star edge rusher. Malik Autry, 5-star defensive lineman. Jacaleb Falk, top 50 national edge rusher. Jordan Crawford, Antonio Coleman. Now you add Nate Marshall, all three of which are in the top 100 nationally. For those who are counting at home, that would be 6 defensive linemen committed to Auburn that would be in the top 100 nationally. They're all top 15 at their position group. Some of them are top 5. You look at Auburn and say, all right, what is most exciting about what Auburn's doing on the recruiting trail? I would argue that it's what they're doing on the defensive line. And why is that so important? As you look at the programs that have been elite in the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, what separates them? It's line of scrimmage play. It's being able to dominate the line of scrimmage. I think Hugh Freeze is very, very knowledgeable about what it takes to win in the SEC. And he's seen Georgia and he's seen Alabama run this conference and say, what kind of separates those two programs? It's the line of scrimmage play. Hugh Freeze is trying to bring that to Auburn, and he's doing an exceptional job of that. If you land the commitment of Nate Marshall, that is 6 defensive linemen that will be in the top 100 nationally committed to this Auburn program. That's difference-making talent on the defensive line. And that's one of those positions where you're just betting on talent, right? At the defensive line spot, you just want to get the freaky athletes. If you're a top 100 national recruit, you're a freaky athlete. So Auburn is just collecting these big bodies on the defensive line that you kind of look towards what 2025 and 2026 are going to look like. It's hard to see this Auburn program not having one of the best defensive fronts that we see, not only in the SEC, but in the country. And that matters a heck of a lot in terms of where Auburn wants to go as a program, specifically in the SEC. Now, a couple updates on some other targets that we got to talk about. Now, we've talked a lot about Duce Knight. It sounds like Auburn is continuing to gain momentum to flip Duce Knight. And I think where you want to start with Duce Knight is this kid, the ceiling might be just as high as any quarterback in this 2025 class. Now, he needs a little bit more polish and development to his game. I think a lot of that has to do with him kind of changing high schools in the middle of the season during his junior year. He's back home in Mississippi. This kid is a freaky athlete at the quarterback position, to kind of put it lightly. He has a massive arm. He's a phenomenal dual threat quarterback. There are so many different ways that you can attack opposing defenses with Duce Knight as your starting quarterback. And I think what's most exciting about the potential commitment of Duce Knight is you look at Walker White and Duce Knight coming in back-to-back classes. Those are two quarterbacks with exceptionally high ceilings. I mean, if Walker White or Duce Knight end up putting it together at the collegiate level, those are some of the best quarterbacks that we'll see in the SEC. So not only are you getting it done on the defensive line, but you're also getting it done at the most important position in all of college football. That's the quarterback spot. We'll see if and when Auburn gets that one done. His film is going to be very fun to dive into, but I think for Auburn fans, we're really excited to see what that senior year looks like. It was a little rocky his junior year. He had a phenomenal offseason camps. Duce Knight, very, very exciting kid, especially to monitor during his senior year. Now, the last guy we got to talk about, and Auburn just kind of becoming a thorn in Michigan's side here, is 5-star offensive tackle Andrew Babala. Obviously, with Carday Smith decommitting and committing to USC, Auburn might want to try to take another premier offensive tackle. You know, it doesn't get any better than Andrew Babala. And I think for a while during the summer, it was Stanford was the team to watch. Michigan has gotten themselves in there. But if you read the intel about Andrew Babala, it continues to sound like Auburn is kind of a dark horse in this recruitment. And I don't think anybody sitting here, Friday afternoon before the 2024 season starts is going to count out Auburn in this recruitment. You look at Andrew Babala and say, this kid is one of the more gifted offensive tackle, kind of similar to this conversation we just had about Duce Knight. Is Andrew Babala the best offensive tackle right now in the 2025 class? No. Could he very well be the best offensive tackle 3 to 4 years down the road in this 2025 class? Yes, absolutely. He's new to the game of football, was primarily a basketball player growing up and kind of the early days of his athletic career. He's now a full-time football player that is a tremendous athlete for 6'6", 280. He has the ideal frame to play left tackle in the SEC. Probably not a year one starter, but when you get to 2026 and 2027, you're looking at a guy that very well could be a first-round NFL draft pick at the left tackle position. And so you look at Auburn and say, we're sitting at a top 5 class in the country right now. Auburn is trending for a top 100 national defensive lineman, a 5-star quarterback in Duce Knight, and a 5-star offensive tackle in Andrew Babala. If you just finish with 2 out of the 3 of those, you're probably sitting at maybe a top 3 class in the country in that 2025 cycle. And I think the fun conversation to have is what happens if Auburn, wins 8 football games into 2024 season. And these recruits were kind of committing to Hugh Freeze saying, hey, I believe in the vision. What happens if they start seeing that vision unfold in the 2024 season? I could see Auburn maybe getting into a couple other guys late in this process come December National Signing Day. I think there is something, and I've been very vocal about it, special brewing for this Auburn Tigers program. We'll continue to monitor it as we head into the 2024 season. But if this team wins football games in 2024, you better watch out for Hugh Freeze in this Auburn program on the recruiting trail. We'll cut it there again. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to you guys later.